All right. Well, welcome everyone. I am so glad to see that you've taken some time out of your busy day and busy schedule to join us again on our year-long journey on Cox campus that we've been doing so far throughout the year. I'm so glad to see everyone join us again. Just put in the chat, is this your first time or have you been here before? Is this your first time or have you been here before with us on the year-long journey?
This is my first time.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Glad to have you. Glad to have you along. Well, today we're going to talk about assessing our students. Now, I know, oh, someone's been learning all year. That is awesome. So today we're going to talk about assessing our students. And I know assessments can be overwhelming. Assessments can even be controversial. Should we assess? Should we not assess? Now that we're in COVID, or even prior to COVID, there was a lot of controversy over it. But we could really learn a lot of good information when we assess our students. Okay. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So just want to introduce myself. My name is Tania-Kay Walker, and I am a facilitator here at the Rollins Center. I've been teaching for 15 years. I've been in the educational field for 15 years. All of that time has been spent with kindergarten through 5th grade students. That's my love. I can't even imagine teaching middle school or high school because I just love the little children. And I definitely just love working with teachers and working with students as a part of my job and my career. Okay. When we think about Cox Campus, we just want to think about our values that we hold here at Cox Campus: rewarding, empowering, connecting, safe, essential. We hope that as a result of your experience with Cox Campus, you feel like you are working towards a greater good and a better future for our children. Believe me, you guys are so important because you set the future for our children. Okay, we just want to talk about our Cox Campus website. On our website, we have so much information, especially for those first timers. If this is your first time on our webinar, I wonder if you've gone to visit our online resources. There's just so much resources there that you could really get to support your students. This particular webinar is mostly geared towards K through 3, but if you have, I saw some childcare providers, some pre-K teachers on here. There's a lot of information for infant toddlers, pre-K students, and there's just a community of teachers on there that you could try to connect with and get some resources. And not only for teachers and childcare providers, but parents. There's a lot of information on there that can help support parents as well. And everything is free through our generous donors. So go online, download everything you need, and it is completely free. Even though it is free, you do have to sign up. So once you get online, it will prompt you to sign up and become a member. Membership is free, resources are free. You do not have to do anything, but yes, you do have to take a minute just to get online and sign up with your information. And what that does really is it helps to keep you in contact with us when we're having our webinars or when new information come out. We'll just send you that information so you know what's going on with Cox Campus. All right, so let's just dive right in. As you already know, we're talking about assessments. I'm not sure if so many people have looked at our assessment course. But this webinar is going to be based on the information from the assessment course. So hopefully once you're finished with this, you could get back in and take a deeper dive into the assessment course. So our learning objectives for today is we're going to talk about the 3 categories or main categories of assessments. We're going to talk about the drill down process that can help you identify your students' growth. And we're going to talk about profile, student profile that you can keep, or data sheet that you could keep to keep track of how your students are doing along and throughout the year. Okay, so why do we assess? Why are we assessing? I've been in a situation where assessments could just be because, the district said to assess. But assessment is really important because it really gives us information that we need to know about our students. Sometimes, we think, okay, we taught that already, but did they really learn it? An assessment can really help us to answer that question. So why do we assess? We assess to inform instruction and differentiate learning, okay? It helps us to know, should we continue to teach this? Should we move on? Have they gotten it already? How can I differentiate using small group instruction to help support my students? So that's one of the main reasons why we assess, is to inform our instruction as teachers and to differentiate that instruction for our students. We also assess to identify our students' strengths and weaknesses. We want to know, what are they good at? Which areas do they already know? And then we also want to know which areas are they weak in? Where's the gaps? Where's the improvements? And those are the areas that will help us when we're differentiating our instructions. We can focus in on that. And then lastly, we assess to intervene when students are not progressing. We need to have that data ready when students are not making progress, so that we can, always call in maybe the response to intervention team, the EIP teacher, maybe a reading specialist. We have to be able to show that, we've taken a couple of assessments and they're still not progressing. What else can we do? What's our next steps? So assessment is important. So assessments really, arguably, is the centerpiece for teaching and learning process. If we don't know where our students is, which assessments help us to know where our students is, we could just teach the scope and sequence, teach the curriculum, but we really want to know how to meet the needs of our students. Here we have here, it says, without some method of analyzing evidence of students learning, we can never know whether our teaching is making a difference. And that's the importance. Is our teaching making a difference? Are they actually learning? All right, so let's think about this for a second and go ahead and put your answers in the chat. How are you using assessments in your classroom? Are you using it just to give a grade? Is it because it's required of your school to support instructional decision? Or maybe it's a combination of, A, B, and C. Go ahead and put it in the chat. How are you using assessments in your classroom? I'm seeing a lot of a combination, okay, to support instructional decisions. Great. And sometimes that's what it is. The district tells us we have to give an assessment, and so we have to give an assessment. But you as a teacher also give some assessments in your classroom that helps to drive your instruction and what you're doing. So awesome. I see a lot of C's and D's. Very good. So let's go ahead and get started with our first video that is also a part of our course as we jump into assessment, introduction to assessment. You could begin to play that video.
Test to determine how much the student has learned.
The bug hid in the cab. Do snag your dress on the M branch.
Think of a summative assessment as an assessment of instruction. Just like a follow-up examination helps determine if your doctor's treatment was effective, summative assessments measure what the student has learned after the completion of a school year or a particular unit of study. The information Ms. Mans has gathered from Shantae's end-of-year summative assessment will help her next teacher know what she is ready to learn. Teachers can also conduct informal assessments throughout the year using games, activities, or other observational tools to track students' progress and tailor learning.
All right, excellent. So we have to be almost like doctors. We have to make sure that we are diagnosing our students and making sure that we know exactly where they are. So let's just jump right in. Assessments, categories, and types. So here we have our assessment types. So we have 3 that we're going to look at today. There may be some others, but today we're going to look at diagnostic, formative, and summative assessment. So a diagnostic assessment is an assessment that's usually given at the beginning of a unit or a beginning of a certain period of time, maybe a quarter or even a semester. This sometimes could be called a pre-assessment or a pre-test, because here we're really trying to figure out what does my students, what do they really know? Where are the gaps? What are some things that it will help me to know, focus more on one area and focus less on another area. So diagnostic assessments is really helpful at the beginning of a unit so we could know what the students know and what they don't know. So those are really important. And usually a diagnostic assessment is given at the beginning of each unit or even each semester. The next assessment is a formative assessment. So the formative assessment is really critical. Of the 3, I would definitely say formative assessment is really critical to teachers. This is where we are continually, daily figuring out, assessing our students. Now, this does not have to be paper and pencil. Formative assessment doesn't have to be paper and pencil. But one of our critical ways of formatively assessing our students is just asking good questions during the lesson, asking our students to give us a thumbs up or thumbs down at some point in the lesson. Another good thing I've seen many teachers do is to have a whiteboard so students can write answers on their whiteboards and then hold it up to show the answer to a question, and you could quickly, just like that, assess, okay, did they get it? Did they not get it? Should I move on? Is that something I need to go back over? So formative assessments are so critical. Daily, you could do multiple formative assessment, informal assessments with your students every day. During your lessons to know if they got it or didn't get it. You could also do exit tickets at the end of a lesson. You could do weekly quizzes. Those are also formative assessments that you could use with your students, but definitely those checks for understanding during a lesson, instead of pushing through, we take some time, we stop, we see, did they get it? Did they not get it? Instead of, sometimes I know we feel like, oh, we just got to get to the end of the lesson. We feel rushed for time or for whatever reason, but it's so critical that we know if they got it or didn't get it. Because what's the point of rushing to the end of the lesson and they haven't learned anything? So formative assessments are so critical. Another way we think about that is observation. As you walk around the classroom and you look and see, are they doing things correctly or not correctly? Are you giving them feedback based on what you observe? That's formative assessment, and that's really critical. Our last type of assessment is our summative assessment. A summative assessment is an end of unit test. So you've taught for 6 weeks, you had 3 or 4 standards that you were covering, and now 6 weeks is at the end, and you're just gonna give them an assessment based on everything that they've learned over the past 6 weeks. And so that sums up everything that they've been learning. But I think at this point, as a teacher, if you've been doing those daily checks, we should not be surprised when that summative assessment scores come in, because we should know, yeah, they should do well on this because we've been checking them daily. So it could also include benchmarks. You know, a district may give a benchmark at the end of a semester or end of a quarter, and projects. You could have a project at the end of a 6 or 8 weeks of going over standards. So diagnostic is at the beginning, summative is all the, formative is all the way through, and summative is at the end. All right, so let's do just a quick recap. This is a check for understanding as we're going through. So I'm modeling as you guys are on here as well. This is a formative assessment, quick recap. So this type of assessment gauges students' process during instruction. Which one is it? A, diagnostic, formative, or summative? Yes, excellent. Excellent. Yes, very good. Formative assessment. Excellent. This is an example of a check for understanding, a formative assessment. All right, let's move to the next one. This type of assessment gives you information on where to start at the start of a unit or a time period. Yes, very good. Excellent. A diagnostic assessment. Excellent. Next. And this type of assessment is information where students learn what they've learned at the end of a unit. Excellent. Excellent job. So I know that I can move on because I formatively assessed and you guys are getting it. And so I can move on to the next thing. All right, excellent job. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into our assessment toolkit. Yes, so let's see if we could play that video about our assessment toolkit.
You can use the Assessment Toolkit resources in the Cox Campus Resource Library to assess each component of the Big Five.
Can we go ahead and
in the
move
steps
back to
that
the beginning
follow,
of the video?
you will see
I
real.
apologize.
We hope you have a new perspective on some of the ways assessments and the data they provide can be helpful for guided instruction. In this lesson, we're going to take a deeper dive and discover why and how we use assessments for measuring specific reading skills. Using our assessment drill-down flowchart, we can pinpoint areas of difficulties for struggling readers. This suggested assessment sequence starts with the most global reading skills and scales back to the most discrete. When we think about assessing these skills, it's good to have tools that help us gather the data we need, just like a doctor has a bag full of instruments to diagnose their patients. Most likely, these tools are already provided by your school. If not, you can use the Assessment Toolkit resources in the Cox Campus Resource Library to assess each component of the Big Five. In the steps that follow, you will see real examples of teachers assessing students. After taking this course on assessments, we also recommend taking our course on small group instruction to see how to put this assessment data to use.
All right, excellent, excellent. So we're going to take a look at the assessment drill down flow chart, which is our next slide. So here's one of our things that we suggest. Now, as the video stated, you may already have some assessments, you know, that you have to use in your classroom. But if you don't have one, we definitely have this flow chart, and all the assessments that's on here can also be found on our Cox Campus resource library. So here you will see that this chart starts with first graders to fifth graders. We also have an assessment for kindergartners, and you guys can go ahead and check that out also on our website. So here we see that the drill down chart starts with oral reading fluency, because this is where we want our students to be. We want our students to be able to read fluently, and we're going to start here. As you can see from the instruction, if those students are struggling with reading or reading fluency and they are not reading on level, then you go ahead and you drill down to phonics, because phonics instruction and knowing the phonics skills supports oral reading fluency. So everything is a prerequisite skill. Phonics, if the students are not doing well in phonics, then there's probably a letter sound issue. If they're not doing well with letter sound, then a phonological awareness letter name assessment. So we're going from a global what they need to know at the beginning, what they need to know at the end, or where we hope that they will be fluent readers. And then we're going back to letter name assessment. So, but also you have to know as a teacher, where do I start? If you know that you know, it's the first grade and they don't know it, then maybe you won't start at fluent reading and you'll pick up at phonics. Now, within each of these assessments, for example, within phonics, the phonics survey, when you look at it, it assesses all the phonics skills. So it would assess CVC words, digraph, vowel teams, and just all the phonics skills, R control vowels. So when you go in and you take it, then it will help you to see, oh, they're doing well in this skill, or they're not doing well in this skill. Also, oral reading fluency, many of you may have already taken, many of you may already have given an oral reading fluency. Usually it's for 1 minute, and you see how many words they've read, see if they're able to read fluently. And also in our oral reading fluency, you would check to see, are they reading on grade level or according to how we want them to read across the board. So all that information and further details can be found in our resources, but always start with fluency and then drill down to letter name assessments. Some third graders may not get all of it, because I'm sure by third grade, they should know their letter names, but as you drill down, you will get to see specifically what areas that they're struggling with, okay? So let's go to our next slide. So we're gonna start with fluency and comprehension based on our drill down that we just looked at, our drill down flow chart. We see that we're starting with fluency and comprehension. So we know that fluency is the ability to read grade level text at an appropriate rate, accuracy, and expression. Students who are disfluent, usually that means that they're not able to decode the words. And because they're not able to decode the words, that means that they're not able to comprehend what the story may be about. So when students are not fluent, then that means we need to drill down some more to see if it's a phonics issue, because usually that means they cannot decode, and that could be why they're not reading fluently. Also with comprehension is a little tricky, because comprehension really is an outcome of many components. So comprehension includes word recognition, which is decoding. It also includes vocabulary knowledge, background knowledge. And those are some things that students will have to have in place in order to be able to be good comprehenders of text. And so when we see that our students are struggling with comprehension, we could really think, first we should think, does this have to do with decoding? 80% of the time, if they can't comprehend, it's a decoding issue. 12% of the time, it may be a language comprehension issue, which means that they don't have the vocabulary, they don't understand the vocabulary in the word, they may not have that background knowledge. And so we need to go back and fill that in. Some students are great readers, they can read everything fluently, but they're still not comprehending. Then we need to think, okay, do we need to teach them about retelling? And we also have a retelling rubric. Do we need to teach them about summarizing? And so when we think about comprehension, there's just so many components that it's so important to drill down to really see what could be causing this issue. Yes, this could also be good for dual language learners. We don't have it specifically for dual language learners, but yes, definitely you could also use this information for dual language learners. When I was in a classroom and I taught ESOL students, I also use this information because, you know, they still need to know letter names, letter sounds, phonics, and those are still skills that they have to master at some point along the way. All right, phonics assessment. Okay, so after we've looked at fluency and comprehension, if we notice that our students are below level when it comes to comprehension and fluency, then we drill down and we go to phonics. Remember, 80% of the time when students are not fluent or disfluent, and students are struggling with comprehension, it is because they have a word recognition problem. Usually that's what it is. Sometimes with our EL students, they actually develop word recognition pretty well, and usually they more so have a language comprehension issue, which is background knowledge and vocabulary and things of that nature. But when we're thinking about phonics skills, this is just an example of a part of the phonics assessment that we have. And this assessment is assessing short vowels, CVC words. So notice here that we have two things. We have our real words, which is on top, and then we have our nonsense words. So why do we have both? Because sometimes teachers say, well, why do we have nonsense words? Well, because those real words, that could be something that they just recognize from reading in the classroom, from the teachers reading, and we don't really know, do they know their sounds? Do they know the phonics skills? Do they know, you know, pot, t? They may just know this word because they've seen it so many times in a particular story. So even though this is important to have, what's really going to tell us if they've mastered the skill of CVC words and knowing those short vowel words is the nonsense words. So students have to be able to decode, these words and blend them back together. And so when we're thinking about these nonsense words, we're listening to see, do they know those short vowel sounds? And when you go into our phonics survey, you will see it's the same thing along the way. So this is just an example of the CVC, but when you're looking at digraph or vowel teams, or consonant LE, those are phonics skills, you will have to give those students both the real words and nonsense words to really be able to see, do they know and understand that phonics skills. If they get all of these real words correct, but only get 2 or 3 of the nonsense words correct, then you know they really haven't mastered CVC words. They really haven't mastered short vowels. So this is going to tell us, hey, now I know they are not able to decode short vowel words. And this is a place when I do my small group instruction that I could work with these students on short vowel words. So this is why this is so important. And so once again, we're drilling down even more. If you give them that phonics assessment and they still hasn't done well on anything on the phonics assessment, depending on your grade and where they're at, then we need to go further. We need to think about, well, do they know their individual letter sounds, like g? Do they know the individual letter sounds? Because if they did, they would have mastered that CVC part. And do they know their letter names? We're drilling down. This may be an issue. They may not know all of their letter names. Like some of our DLL students may not know all the letter names, or some of our students may not know all the letter sounds. So the further we drill, then the further we could figure out what the issue is, and we can help support them there. So that's the whole purpose of the drill down, because you go all the way from reading fluency, which is where we want them to be eventually, to the beginning skills of letter names and letter sounds, because that's where it all begins. And everything in between, we could figure out, okay, this is what they know, this is what they don't know, this is where the gaps are when it comes to our students. So this is so important for us to be able to drill down and figure out what they know and what they don't know. So I know, you know, all of this could sound overwhelming. You know, am I drilling all the way down? Do I need to do everything? No, this is based on, you know, your diagnostics that you've taken at the beginning of the year, what you've been seeing. We're now currently, maybe you're doing winter to spring assessments right now. So you should have had some kind of assessment at the beginning of the school year. So that data from the beginning of the school year will help you to know where to start and where to begin as we move forward. So here we have our student data profile, which if you don't have this, we also have a copy of it on in our resource center. This is so important when we think about keeping track of where our students have been. Sometimes it's so important to be able to know where they started, where they are, and where they end up. So if you don't have, or if you do have something from the beginning of the school year, then you could put it in here. For those kindergarten teachers or those pre-K teachers, how many you will put here, how many uppercase letters were they able to identify at the beginning of the school year? How many lowercase letters were they able to identify? Did they know any of their sounds? So hopefully you have track and data of that, and most kindergarten teachers do. And then you could put that in there. And then now during the winter time, and then the end is probably spring. Now in the middle, you go back and reassess. How many letters? Do they know all their letters now that we've been doing it for so many months? Do they know all the uppercase and lowercase? You know, do they know their sounds? And then we could go ahead and keep track of that. This is why this is so important, because then if we realize, okay, back in August and September, they only knew 12, you know, no big deal. But now it's winter or the middle of the school year, and now they know 14, then you're like, oh, wait a second. You know, they really have not made much progress. What is our next steps are going to be? Now would be time to share this information, maybe with a RTI team, response to intervention team, or SS student intervention team, student support team. Is it time to see if we could get the EIP teacher, the reading specialist, to come in and help support that student? Because we notice that from the beginning to the middle, they are not making progress. This is so important, because when you're seeking extra help, I know from being in the schools, they always ask for data. It can't just be, this is what I noticed, this is what I observed. That's important as well. But the data is going to be so valuable that you could really show, look at what they were doing in the beginning and look at where they are now. This information is also important to show parents. Parents want to see data as well. You know, data is not just for the teacher and for school staff. Parents want to see, this is what they were doing in the beginning, and I could show you now that this is where they are in the middle and they're not making progress. Sometimes showing that data to parents can really make a difference, because then they could really see for themselves, like, oh, my student is not making progress. Parents sometimes are, they could be devastated or concerned, like, what's going on? My kid is not making progress. Show them the data. Or sometimes parents are even in denial. No, they're making progress because they're doing this at home and they're doing it so well. And then you can pull out your data and you say, well, This is how they did while they were in school. Not sure what's going on at home, but while they're in school, we did this assessment and this is what came up. And this is how they're progressing or not progressing. Just for a minute, just to go the other way in the sense of not only are we looking for weaknesses, but you may have a kindergarten kid that comes in and they already know all their letters. There's some kids that come in and they're already, high flyers, as we say, and they're doing so well. This data is going to be important because this tells you, okay, they already know their letter names, they already know their letter sounds. Now it's time for you to really move them on in small group instruction. Now you can really teach them some CVC words, some short vowel words, and maybe even pull out some decodable books to help them begin to read. So data is not just to find those weaknesses and find areas that we can help our students that are struggling, but data is also helpful for enhancement. How can we push those students that are doing really well to the next level? So if they know all their phonics skills, then you could take out text and really start teaching them some reading strategies, in third grade, to help them with that reading comprehension. So data can be useful for both ways. It can help with those struggling students, so we could fill in those gaps. And it could also help with students that need some enhancing, some enrichment and helping those students to push forward, so we can help them do better there. With those students. So data goes both ways. So if you do not have some way or some form of keeping track of that data, suggest go ahead and use this, or maybe your school already has one in place. Please go ahead and fill that out, because sometimes we really could lose track of where they were in the beginning to where they are now and at the end. So it is so important to get that data, because what are we going to do with all that information? All that information. The number one reason we're really collecting that data is to make sure we're meeting our individual student needs. As I said before, we want to make sure that we're putting our students in groups, small group, targeted small group instruction based on what they need, not based on the curriculum, not based on the scope and sequence, but how can we form small groups that will help to support those students that need that particular skill. So if you have some students, you've done your phonics assessments and you realize I have these 5 students that are struggling with digraphs or vowel teams, let's put them together in a group and let's support them based on what they need. If I've taken the oral reading fluency and 5 students are reading way above level, okay, let's put them together in a group so that we can start having them to read higher text and also getting them to understand some reading strategies. So it is so important that we have that data profile, so it will help us to put our students in groups and to help support their needs. So let's go ahead and play this video.
Strategic.
If you could start from the beginning, yes.
Information is power. The assessment data we have collected helps us to know our students and gives us the power to better understand their skill level, their needs, and the progress they are making throughout the year. By organizing this all in one place, it also gives us the power to choose the best strategies for helping each student become a fluent reader. Once we have student data profile information for each of our students, we can use it to form small groups at the beginning of the year. Small group instruction makes it possible to put students with similar needs together so we can work on specific areas more strategically. We can reflect on student progress at the middle of the year and use student data profile and other informal assessment information to decide if we need to make adjustments to our small groups. But we don't have to wait until the middle of the year to regroup students. As learning progresses, We can regroup students whenever it is necessary. Using data from progress monitoring, we should make adjustments to our small groups throughout the year to make sure we are selecting the right books and activities for each group, and that each student is in the right group for his or her reading level.
Okay, so this is why it's so important, because we need to make sure that we're selecting the right instruction for what the students need. That's why we have targeted small group instruction. The other thing that I wanted to bring up was sometimes we need to, even though we look a lot at the students and what they need and what they're struggling with, or maybe enrichment, sometimes as teachers, we just need to reflect on our instruction and think, is there something that I need to adjust to be able to reach these students? So, you know, there's so many different types of ways to, you know, implement instructions in the classroom. And that's why we always talk about having a toolbox or a tool belt or a toolkit or something like that, so we can adjust what we're doing to be able to meet the needs of the students. Because one particular way may work with one student, and then another way doesn't, that same way may not work with a different student. So do we need to pull out manipulatives? Do we need to pull out cards? Do we need to pull out games that we could play with our students? Some students really learn through games. Some students learn through song. And if we could just implement multiple ways for our students to get those skills, then that would really be important. That's why it's, you know, important. One of the things we have on our resource also is how to form targeted small group instruction for our students, to make sure that what we're doing with them is what they need and not what we think they need, or we're guessing, or is this based on our scope and sequence, or is it based on our curriculum? But everything that we do is about what is needed for that student. And when we think about flexible grouping, this is also a place where assessment comes in. I don't know if you guys have heard of progress monitoring. I'm sure you have. We could really progress monitor when we have our students in our small group instruction. So if you have a small group, maybe every 2 to 3 weeks, you have a small group of students that, you notice that they don't know digraph. So you put them together in a small group and you want to see, are they progressing? Are they learning? So every 2 or 3 weeks, you give them a short assessment to see if they're doing well. Those small groups should be flexible, because if you have 5 students in that group and then you notice 2 of them really got it and they're doing well, then you push them on to another skill that they may be struggling with. Don't keep them in that group for 6 weeks when at week 3 that they've already gotten it. That's why these groups are flexible, because kids can come in and go out of those groups based on how fast or how slow that they're learning. So these groups have to be kept flexible. Okay. So we're just going to go ahead and play this video just to wrap up.
Trust the doctor to know. We trust the doctor to know what is best for our health and development. Our students are trusting us to know what is best for their educational development. Bringing together the tools, the data, and the knowledge, we can put each of our students on a path to reading. Assessments and the information we gather from them can help us to know our students better. Empowered with data and more focused effort, we can be confident that we are battling the illiteracy crisis and moving each of our students down the path to becoming proficient readers.
So once again, assessment doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be controversial, but assessment can really be a tool to help us to understand what our students need and how we can adjust our instruction to help to meet that need. So just wanted to show you some of the resources that we have, and one of them that I thought would be valuable for you to know about is these assessments can also be given virtually, because I know some students, some teachers may be working virtually, and you're wondering, well, how can I give these assessments with my students virtually? So we have a face-to-face assessment that you can use, and we also have a virtual directions how to give these assessments virtually that could also be helpful for your students. So whenever you get a chance, go in and look at either one of those, depending on how you are working this year. All right, so let's go ahead and go to our reflection. And also if you have any questions, just go ahead and put it in the chat. How can you use formative assessment as a part of your lesson tomorrow? How can you use formative assessment as a part of your lesson tomorrow? We know that, you know, I've always felt that formative assessment is out of the three is the most important, because that's when we're doing our checks and our checks for understanding. What are some ways that you do that you are already checking for understanding or using formative assessment in your room? Or what are some ways you think you could start implementing that in your room tomorrow? Go ahead and put that in the chat. How can you do some checks for understanding during your lesson tomorrow, or, you know, at some point in the future? Or you could even, I believe you could even come off mute and say how you're going to use it. Okay, so you know you can do the thumbs up, thumbs down, you know, have whiteboards there. You could also, yes, you could also use anecdotal notes. Sometimes at one point when I was in the classroom, just had a clipboard with names of all the students and just had notes. When I took notes as I walked around to see, okay, this student is getting it, this student is not getting it, or, you know, wrote down specifically what they needed to work on. Observations, exit tickets, those are all good. Remember, exit ticket is a quick, you know, 1 to 3 question or even fill in that students can answer. And the reason I think this is so important is because if you're doing your checks along the way, when it comes to that summative assessment, there should be, you know, we shouldn't be like, oh my goodness, you know, 80% of my class failed the summative. No, because if you've been checking along the way, then as a teacher, you would get that information from the assessment that, hey, I needed to spend more time here. I could have went back some more to help these students or move forward. So that's why I have singled out the formative assessment, because it is so critical to both diagnostic and the summative assessment as well. All right, thank you so much for those responses. All right, we just wanted to highlight the Literacy and Justice for All. The Rollins Center and Cox Campus is this year partnering with Marietta City Schools here in Georgia to bring our Science of Reading information to them. So if you are interested and you want to hear more about that initiative and how it's going there, you could always log into our Cox campus with the link that is below, Literacy and Justice for All. And we're still going through with our year-long journey. So our next session is going to be Literacy Workstation, and this really goes hand in hand with what we talked about today. What are you going to put in those literacy workstations that will help to support your students based on the assessments that you've given them? Those stations shouldn't just be random stations. Those stations should really reflect information and skills that are needed for your students. So don't miss out on that session coming up in February. All right, so I am so glad for everyone that came along and joined in. There is a poll that should be coming up with some questions. Once you have that poll, you could go ahead and answer those questions. And also, if you have any questions for me about assessments, you could go ahead and put it in the chat, or you could even come off mute as everyone else is filling out the poll. For more information and for even a deeper dive into assessments and assessing our students, don't forget to check out the course, Assessing Our Students, on Cox campus. All right, guys, well, I'm gonna say goodbye. I hope you have a great afternoon, a great evening, and I hope to see you again at our next session, at our next webinar in February. Have a great evening. Thank you.